Marvel's Avengers Age of Ultron. Summary review. 7 out of 10 if you're not committed to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, 8 out of 10 if you are. This film is an action-packed adventure filled with likable characters, great action sequences, and an overall decent narrative. But at the end of the day, it feels somewhat generic and doesn't lack that extra special something that makes it great. Alright, now for the more in-depth discussion where I talk about why I don't think this film got the perfect 10. There will be spoilers ahead, so watch out. The first issue I felt was character fatigue. We're looking at characters like Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, Hulk, characters that we've seen before in standalone films and also in ensemble casts. The problem is, with the time limit of an ensemble cast film, you don't have the time to really characterize these characters that we've seen their superficial traits before. That said, the new characters, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, were introduced fairly well. Their backstory was simple, to the point, and it kept you convinced of their motivations, including their transition from the bad guys to the good guys. We see similar levels of character development with Black Widow, who get small snippets into their past, but not a huge amount of time. Admittedly, I felt they could spend a little bit more time on what they did with Black Widow here, but it was okay. In terms of Hawkeye, a large amount of the complaints I've heard about this film is how much time they spend on Hawkeye's background. And this is one of the points that I feel differentiates the people who really like the Marvel Cinematic Universe from the people who aren't really committed to it. The problem with Hawkeye is he's been in 3 films. He's been a main character in 2 of them. If they don't characterize him now, he's not going to get characterized. So as a result, I can see why they spent more time in this film dedicated to characterizing Hawkeye, because they have to. He's not going to get his own standalone film. That said, it did feel a tiny bit too long. For my tastes, it was fine, but they could have cut out maybe one dialogue scene where he was talking about his wife or to his wife, and for me that would remove any complaints about it. That said, it was fine. The next character we get introduced to is the Vision, who in this film was shown a little too briskly. That said, if you're committed to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you understand that this is kind of a time-crunched movie and that he's going to go more in depth in future films, so you're willing to forgive it. Again, it depends on whether or not you're dedicated to the Marvel Cinematic Universe or not. The final big character we're introduced to in this film is Ultron himself, the villain. This is where I feel the main problems of the film kind of coalesce. The fact is, Ultron is an android, a robot, super powerful villain, but he comes off as being kind of generic. He's a great character, but at the end of the day, he feels like a generic big bad evil guy. The characteristics of Ultron is that he's a robot. He's very technology-based, but because of plot, he doesn't really do tech-based things. He comes off as this generic, creates an army of robots, terrorizes the world, which you could replace him with Doctor Doom and it'd be essentially the same thing. Again, this isn't a problem with the film, it just made the film feel more generic and kept it from getting that really high score, in my mind. Okay, I know I said spoilers before, but now is like the really plot spoilery parts that will actually discuss the end events of the movie, so if you kind of care about spoilers, do not watch this if you don't want to know about the end of the film. Alright. Quicksilver's death. This is the one thing that I kind of felt iffy about walking out of the theater. That said, I immediately realized why it was important. Killing off a new character like Quicksilver might seem like a bad move, but at the end of the day, it's kind of necessary. If you look at previous films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, namely Coulson in Avengers and Nick Fury in Captain America 2, death has been taken lightly in the Marvel Cinematic Universe so far, and the problem with this is they need to take actions to make death seem permanent and an actual threat to the main characters, so they almost had to kill off a main character or someone who's important in order to make death seem like a valid threat. And especially with Scarlet Witch's and Quicksilver's limited storylines, now that they don't have mutants, I can see why they killed Quicksilver off. Again, I wasn't really happy about it, but I see why it was necessary in greater context. Last thing I wanted to discuss was Black Widow's portrayal in this film. There's been some discussion about it, and I just wanted to briefly touch on it. First of all, yes, I felt the relationship between her and Bruce Banner was a little awkward. That said, there's a female and a male in an ensemble cast. She's probably going to get paired with someone. And I can see why they chose him. Also, the reveal that she cannot have children was a weird, and I am not the best person to talk about why that's weird, but it was weird. It also felt strange that she was damseled in distress when she was captured by Ultron in the end of the film. It felt convenient that the only female character was taken captive, especially when you consider that characters, for example, Hawkeye, would have been a much better captive both emotionally and thematically. Hawkeye's major character development in this film meant there was more emotional tension built if he was taken captive, and additionally, he possessed the spy skills to escape in similar ways that Natasha did. Like I said, this film was entertaining, it had good action scenes, it had good characters, but at the end of the day, the narrative felt a little generic and a little flat, and it just kept it from being a really great movie. How I feel about future upcoming Avengers films purely depends on the new characters that they introduce in the films between now and Avengers 3. I definitely see that they could bring in some really stellar characters, and it could be really interesting, but right now, I'm feeling a little, it could go either way. If there are any elements of the film that you'd like to discuss, or you think I didn't cover, or even any films that you think you'd like to hear my thoughts on in the future, please let me know in the comments below, and see you next review.